In some form or another, whether in the arcade or on your parents' living room floor, video games have been a part of mainstream popularity since the late 70s. Today, I'm doing something a little different from my usual content, which mainly consists of stream highlights or game reviews. Today, I'm going to be going over my personal top 50 games of all time. Now, this is not a factual list of the best games. This is a list of games that I've loved through the years, games that have made an impact on me, and games I would recommend to play at some point. A little about me. I'm a 50-year-old that's been gaming since 1979. My first experience was on an Intellivision running Breakout in a Sears department store. From that point on, I was obsessed. I played arcade games anytime I could scrounge up the quarters, and I played on friends' Ataris and ColecoVisions until I got my first console, which was the NES back in 1987, and I stuck with Nintendo until the PlayStation came out. Now, there were years that I missed out on some really great titles due to life just getting in the way, but I've been able to go back and play some of those games. And for the past 8 years, I've been fortunate enough to play games for a living, and am truly living out my childhood dream. Enough about me though, let's go over the list of games that have been a part of my life at some point over the past 43 years. First up at number 50, Sin. Sin was a 1998 FPS from Ritual Entertainment that ran on a modified version of the Quake 2 engine. Set in 2037, you play as John Blade, a commander of the hardcore. Your mission is to take care of a corporation called Syntech who's been distributing a recreational drug to the city. Sin was the first FPS I played on mouse and keyboard. I didn't use WASD, I shifted my keyboard over to the left and I used the arrow keys and the number pad. Yeah, it was a whole thing. But it was also my first experience with PvP in a game. I remember the fun and the frustrations fondly. Next up at number 49, Ultima IV. Ultima IV was a role-playing game by Lord British. It was also my very first experience with an RPG. I was around 13 or 14 at the time, and I remember being fascinated knowing that there was a person out there named Lord British. It's really silly now, but it was cool to me back then. I don't remember your character's name, but I do remember the game was more about improving their moral compass as opposed to trying to bring the world out of darkness. Moral compass, huh? I'm not going to mention the fact that I played a bootleg copy of this on my Commodore 64. The game was full of puzzles, many of which I never solved because this was before the time of Googling the solution. I'd really like to go back and play all of these games at some point. Coming in at 48, Ghosts and Goblins. Ghosts and Goblins was a side-scrolling arcade game that later came to consoles. If I remember correctly, you played as Arthur, and like a lot of games at the time, you're in search of a princess who's imprisoned by a demon or some other bad guy. You slowly progress through increasingly more difficult areas until you reach said demon. I loved this game in the arcade, but I was also very bad at it. Learning a game in the arcade was a struggle at times as each mistake you made was a quarter, and when you're out of lives you needed another quarter, which is not easy to come by as a preteen with no job. But I digress. At number 47, Kid Icarus, the first NES game on the list. Kid Icarus was a Greek-inspired platform where you play as a character named Pit. Armed with a bow, you make your way through the Angel Land in search of 3 power items so you can rescue the goddess Palatina. Several all-nighters, lots of password-filled scraps of paper, and a lot of Doritos later, my friend and I finally beat this game. To this day, it's still one of the hardest games I've ever played. Next up at number 46, Ryar. The thing I remember the most about Ryar was the soundtrack. I'm not sure why it was so appealing to me, but that 8-bit music really went hard. I seem to remember seeing this in the arcade, but I played it on the NES. The thing I remember the most about this game was that there was no battery in the cartridge, and there were no saves, and to top it off, no password system. There were unlimited continues, but if you were planning on playing and trying to finish, you needed to clear your schedule beforehand. Next up at number 45, Hades. Hades is a hack and slash roguelite. I don't know what it is. It's a rogue thing. But it's one of those games where when you die, you start all over while keeping a little bit of progress to help you on your next run. This game really took me by surprise as I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. The gameplay loop is very satisfying, and each time you die, you get fed a little bit more of the story. Your character's name is Zagreus. You're the son of Hades, and you're trying to escape the underworld to reach Mount Olympus. You make your way through several increasingly difficult areas, acquiring abilities and weapons to help you through each area, which culminates in a fight with dear old dad. Aside from that, all you need to know is Cerebus is a good boy. Coming in at number 44, The Legend of Zelda. Now I know a lot of you will say, what? Ocarina or Majora's Mask was the best, and that's okay. This one stands out to me because not only was the hype around this game unreal, just looking at that beautiful gold cartridge was an experience unto itself. The original Legend of Zelda was full of secrets and puzzles, and while a lot of the later titles only made the game better, this one's purely nostalgia for me. Sitting on the floor of my grandparents' living room in front of the big floor model TV for hours on end, when all my papa wanted me to do was go outside like a normal kid, holds a special place in my heart. At number 43, A Plague Tale, Requiem. The story to this game was so unbelievably well written and gut-wrenching at the same time. You play as Amicia, who must guide herself and her younger brother Hugo to refuge through plague-ridden France in the 1300s. The game mixes stealth, puzzles, light combat, and rat control. Yes, I said rat control. With a very good story that will make a grown man cry. Me, I'm the grown man. I cried. The first game was also very good, but the second installment built on the mechanics from the first game, making it a much more enjoyable experience. Play it. At number 42, Dragon's Lair. Dragon's Lair was, if I remember correctly, the first arcade game to run from a Laserdisc. It was honestly more of an interactive movie than a game, but damn, it was impressive. You play as Dirk, who's trying to rescue, you guessed it, a princess whose name is Daphne. This was the first arcade game that I can remember requiring 2 quarters to play instead of 1, and more times than not, those 2 quarters were gone before you knew it. In a time when games consisted of blocky sprite animations, this was a full-fledged animation, which was done by the legendary Don Bluth. The game was very scripted, and it consisted of the player basically learning through trial and error which direction to push on the joystick to keep from dying in each scene. To this day, it's still a gorgeous game. At number 41, 1942. Now I realize with a little bit of finagling, we could have made this work out and it could have been number 42, but it's fine, whatever. This was another arcade title which was eventually ported to the NES. I might be wrong, but I think this was the first in the 19XX series of games. I played a lot of this one at the local mini golf place in town where I grew up. The plot's fairly simple. You pilot a P-38 on its way to Tokyo to destroy the Japanese fleet. As you fought through, you earned power-ups from destroyed enemies that changed your guns or gave you companion planes to aid you. It was a simple top-to-bottom scroller, but it could quickly get hectic. There was a sort of barrel roll mechanic that could allow you to get out of some hairy situations. And I played this recently, and honestly, it still holds up for what it is. At number 40, Killzone 3. The first PS3 entry on this list, this first-person shooter was a massive improvement over the previous games. Much more responsive controls, smarter enemies, and a more interesting story makes Kill 3 stand out to me. You play as Sergeant Thomas Sevchenko, a member of Alpha Squad. The game takes place pretty much immediately after the events of Killzone 2. You and your captain regroup and make plans to evacuate. Things go awry, and many bullets are shot. I'll be honest, that's pretty much all I remember about the story, but the gameplay was excellent. It was also my second experience with PvP, and yep, I sucked at it. Coming in at number 39, Super Mario World. The brothers and Princess Peach take a much-earned vacation, but the relaxation is cut short when Peach is, you guessed it, kidnapped by Bowser yet again. Now, instead of sipping non-alcoholic beverages in the sun, you must rescue her and save Dinosaur Land. New abilities such as the Cape Feather and of course, Yahoo! Made this entry a blast and solidified it to some as one of the greatest Mario games ever made. Another side-scroller with an overworld level select map, You make your way through Dinosaur Land to Bowser's Castle to face off for what is surely the last time, right? Right? How long can they keep this going? At number 38, Fallout 3. It's the year 2077, and having grown up in a vault your entire life, on your 19th birthday, you escape the vault and head into the world in search of your father, who left in an attempt to revive a water purification project he started before entering the vault. There should have been a period in there somewhere. Stepping out of Vault 101 for the first time and seeing the massive world in front of you is an experience I'll never forget. Never has a barren, post-apocalyptic world been so impressive at first glance. From blowing up Megaton to walking around Washington for hours to the sounds of Three Dog, Fallout 3 is my favorite entry in the Fallout series. At number 37, Titanfall 2. You play as Jack, a rifleman in the militia that aspires to be a Titan pilot. You get your shot when your captain is mortally wounded. He transfers control of his Titan, named BT, to you and tasks you with completing his mission. The single-player campaign of Titanfall 2, while it can be finished in 8 to 10 hours, is excellent. Along the way, you'll unlock new Titan cores that you can stuff BT's, we'll call it a brain, into, and unlock new abilities and weapons. Fast-paced action, great dialogue, and a heartwarming story of a boy and his inherited bot. Titanfall 2 is what led to the Battle Royale Apex Legends, and I hope we get Titanfall 3 at some point. Next up at number 36, Resistance: Fall of Man. I hear some of you right now saying that Resistance 2 was the better game, and that may be true, but for me, I really enjoyed the story of the initial entry into the series. It's the early 1900s and an alien race known as the Chimera land in Russia. They infect humans, causing them to evolve into an army of grotesque creatures. Soon most of Europe has been taken by the Chimera, and the US sends a task force to assist. You, Nathan Hale, and your team has been infected, and you're the only survivor. Realizing you have a resistance, exposure to the infection has made you stronger and faster. You now use these powers to save the human race like any good boy would do. Next up at number 35, Half-Life. Boy, oh boy, what a series. 5 years before Steam even existed, Valve created their first game, Half-Life. You play as crowbar-wielding physicist Gordon Freeman, who works at the Black Mesa Research Facility. Scientists being scientists, they unintentionally open a dimensional rift and let in a bunch of alien jerks who are like, hey, it's our time to shine. Gordon must fight his way through Black Mesa to find a way to close the portal and save humanity. Head crabs, tentacles, and of course the G-Man make this game a classic and a must-play for fans of aliens and shooters. Next up at number 34, Final Fantasy VII. This was the last game that I finished in the series, and the first game to ever make me feel feelings. You assume the role of Cloud, a mercenary who, while compensating for something with that massive sword, works with two members of Avalanche, Barrett and Tifa, to blow up a reactor in the city of Midgard that's polluting the planet. After an attempt to destroy another reactor goes wrong, Cloud winds up in the city slums where he meets Aerith, who we will not talk about. Aerith joins you and others, and you chase after Cloud's nemesis, Sephiroth. The story is so deep, and to tell you any more about it would be a crime. You should experience it yourself. I'll get around to checking out the remake at some point myself. Up next at number 33, Paperboy. Another arcade classic, Paperboy has you assume the role of a paperboy. You ride your bicycle through the neighborhood attempting to deliver newspapers to the houses of subscribers and to vandalize non-subscribers' houses. I was never really sure if this was a strong arm tactic by Big News to get people to subscribe to their paper or what was going on. Anyway, you either deliver the paper or destruction to the neighborhood, all while avoiding obstacles that will cause you to fall off your bike, and based on the fact that the game had lives, die. The cabinet was unique in the fact that it had bicycle handlebars instead of a traditional joystick and buttons. Your subscriber count, much like YouTube, went up and down each day depending on how you performed. Each day concluded with an obstacle course that could get you bonus points. At number 32, Cubert. Another arcade classic that was ported to pretty much everything imaginable. The premise of Cubert is simple. Starting at the top of a pyramid, you needed to jump onto each square in order to change its color. Once each square was its intended target color, the round ended and you progressed to the next level. You had obstacles to avoid in the form of Coily, a snake who would chase you down and try to corner you; Ugg and Wrong Way, two enemies that would start at the top and continually move towards the bottom before jumping off; and Slick and Sam, two enemies that would revert the color change of your squares you had previously jumped on. Each level saw its difficulty increase a bit, with later levels allowing each square to change to two different colors, meaning you had to touch each square twice to get to the target color. Next up at number 31, The Goonies. Originally, and to the best of my knowledge, unlike Goonies 2, which was an NES release, The Goonies was only available in the US as a PlayChoice 10 arcade cabinet. Now, if you're unfamiliar, PlayChoice 10 was a Nintendo cabinet that basically ran off of an NES. It housed 10 different games. Your quarter got you a set amount of time to play one of the 10 games on the cabinet. Goonies was based on the movie and roughly follows along. You assume the role of the player instead of Mikey, and armed initially with a kick, you can acquire items like a slingshot or bombs to help you along the way. You make your way through the different levels, finding keys and rescuing other Goonies. If you rescue every Goonie along the way, you can make it to the final level, which is the pirate ship. But failing to rescue each Goonie before the end of the pirate ship level will just restart you at the beginning. I spent hours on hours in a local convenience store playing and finishing this game in 1987. At number 30, Tetris. I'm not sure what I can say about this game that isn't already known. My first experience with Tetris was on the original Game Boy, and I went through so many sets of batteries while playing that game. Even if you've never played Tetris, you've surely heard of it, and I think it's been released on more platforms than Skyrim has. Next up at number 29, Outrun. Another arcade classic. This game could be found as a stand-up or sit-down cabinet. It featured a steering wheel, a gear stick, and gas and brake pedals. Some of the sit-down cabinets also had hydraulics to simulate a driving experience. In the game, you drive a red Ferrari Testarossa, and your goal is to reach a checkpoint before your time runs out. Reaching a checkpoint extends your time as you make your way to the next checkpoint, and just before reaching the end of the race, you're given the option of which route to take in the form of a fork in the road. In total, there were 5 final destinations. The standout for me in this game was the option to choose your radio station. The music in Outrun was phenomenal and is even credited for the music genre synthwave. Coming in at number 28, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Turtles in Time. It's 1991, the year I graduated high school, and the year that arcades saw Turtles in Time make its debut. The sequel to the original TMNT game, the cabinet could be found as a 2-player or 4-player control scheme. The 2-player version would let you choose which turtle you wanted to play, whereas the 4-player cabinet had the characters assigned to a certain joystick. Starting in New York City, you make your way through various historical eras while defeating foot soldiers, leading up to a boss fight before you move through time to the next encounter. There were a few upgrades from the original TMNT arcade game to this one, but overall it was the same thing. Tons of fun. Next up at number 27, Donkey Kong Country. One of the many great games from Rare, Donkey Kong Country sees you take the role of old DK himself with the sometimes assistance of nephew. Yeah, I think he was his nephew. Anyway, Diddy Kong. You set out to recover the stolen banana stockpile from King K. Rool and his lackeys, the Kremlins. You must overcome obstacles and baddies along your way to collect them, find secret bonus stages, and defeat bosses. This side-scroller has an overworld level selector and has something like 40 levels, which are increasingly more difficult. Each area ended with a boss fight with a rinse and repeat situation until you made it to K. Rool. At number 26, Infamous: Second Son. The original Infamous was great. The second one was also good, but I could never quite get over the change in Cole's voice actor. For me, Second Son was a standout. Releasing on the PS4, the graphics were way more polished than the previous 2 games were on the PS3. You assume the role of Delson, a graffiti artist who is a conduit that can absorb and copy the powers of other conduits he touches. Delson can manipulate and use powers like neon, smoke, concrete, and video. Yes, video. These powers greatly enhance Delson's parkour abilities, and see you fighting your way to take down Brooke Augustine, the director of the Department of Unified Protection, for her acts against the Akamish Reservation. The game also featured a karma system which changed based on the actions you took in the world. At number 25, Super Mario 64. Building on the Mario experience in every way possible, Super Mario 64 is a 3D platformer that sees you controlling, Mario, as he runs, jumps, crawls, climbs, swims, and kicks his way to Bowser to rescue the perpetually kidnapped Princess Peach. I mean, she did make you a cake after all. It would be rude of you not to save her and eat that cake, right? You must explore different worlds that are hidden in magical paintings scattered throughout the castle and collect power stars. Once you've collected enough stars, you can fight Bowser, rescue Peach, and get that cake. Until now, no one had seen Mario look and play this well. At number 24, Spider-Man, Miles Morales. From the feel-good opening scenes to the loss of a friend, this entry to the Spider-Man series is a masterpiece, and it's one of my favorites. At the beginning of the game, after having trained Miles, Peter has left New York to assist MJ with MJ things, and has left the protection of New York to Miles. Along with your bud Genki and his app, you patrol the city and protect its citizens from the war between Roxxon and the Underground, led by the Tinkerer. The gameplay is very similar to the previous Spider-Man game, but Miles has some new abilities and animations such as camouflage and venom blast, and new gadgets like remote mines and a gravity well to pull enemies together. My favorite part of this entry is there's no screwball. At number 23, another superhero game, Batman, Arkham Asylum. Let's be honest, all the Arkham games are pretty great. The story to Asylum stands out more to me than the others though, and it was very hard to choose just one of the 7 or 8 Arkham games. After Joker's assault on City Hall lands him back in Arkham, which also just happens to be holding a large portion of his gang after the Blackgate fire, Harley Quinn manages to take control of security, allowing the Joker to escape. You control Batman as he makes his way through Arkham Asylum searching for Joker, who's threatening to detonate bombs all over Gotham if anyone attempts to help Batman. Along the way, you'll deal with the likes of Scarecrow, Bane, Poison Ivy, and eventually a mega-jacked Joker. The combination of stealth, detective vision, and hand-to-hand combat aren't anything new from the previous games, but this one's a standout to me for sure, mostly because of the story. Now at number 22, Little Big Planet. Honestly, all of the Little Big Planets are all charmingly amazing in their own right. This one sticks out to me the most because I spent a lot of time playing it with my now 20-year-old son, who was 6 when this came out. We played the first 3 games together, but this one was the one that got him interested in playing games with other people, as well as unlocked his creativity in creating levels. I remember how excited he was when he published his first level and saw that other people were playing it. I made a lot of memories with him, and for that reason, this one is on my list. All the Little Big Planet games still hold up though. Now at number 21, Fear. Fear was called a psychological horror first-person shooter. It was heavily inspired by Japanese horror and featured the then typical creepy girl with long hair covering her face situation recognizable from movies like The Ring. That character in Fear was Alma. First Encounter Assault Recon, or FEAR, was created to combat paranormal threats to national security. Your character, known only as Point Man, has just joined FEAR and with his other 2 teammates was searching for a rogue psychic operative. The operative is developing a team of telepathically controlled soldiers, which he plans to use to seize control of the ATC, a corporation that works in cryogenics, telepathy, cloning, and nuclear tech. Your character experiences hallucinations from time to time and has visions of things he doesn't understand, which lend to the horror element. The AI in this game were phenomenal and would often adapt to the player and their abilities. The inclusion of reflex time, similar to bullet time in Max Payne, opened the door for a lot of interesting fights. Next up at number 20, Guardians of the Galaxy. This game was a lot of fun, but if I'm being honest, the absolute best part of this game was the hilarious dialogue and banter between the characters in the game. The voice acting in this game was seriously some of the most well done stuff I've ever seen in a game. I laughed out loud so many times I lost count. The gameplay itself is well done, but nothing terribly groundbreaking. Playing as Peter but having the ability to control all the other members of your party was a nice inclusion, and it set up some interesting interactions. But seriously, the dialogue and the mid-battle banter in this game were top-notch. Don't get hung up on the fact that this is the comic book version of the Guardians and not the MCU versions, and play it. Next up at number 19, Far Cry 3. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity? It's not having played what is arguably the best entry into the Far Cry series. Michael Mando's Voss is right up there with some of the best villains literally ever. I'll take heat for this, but even much better than Handsome Jack. You play through the tropical open world as Jason, who was on a skydiving vacation in Bangkok with a few of his friends, when they were captured by pirate lord Voss, who plans to sell them as slaves. You manage to escape and the chase begins. Without spoiling any more story, you'll find yourself using stealth and an arsenal of weapons to complete missions and objectives. Earning XP allows you to unlock new skills in the skill trees, which will greatly aid you in your mission to have sex. Wait, that's not right. Well, I mean, you do have sex, but that's not the main mission. Or is it? Coming in at number 18, Tony Hawk's Underground 2. The sixth Tony Hawk in the series was the most fun one to me. Having played all of them prior, I just enjoyed this one more. Also, it had Bam Margera in it at the height of his popularity before he became, whatever he is now. The game was silly, over the top, and just a lot of fun overall. The story was okay, nothing amazing, but it had enough chuckles in it. It also had some returning levels from other games like The School, Canada, Philly, and the Downhill Jam. Returning features were there, along with new ones like the Focus Bar and the Freakout, which extended the gameplay loop. Now at number 17, BioShock 2. Mechanically, this game was better than the original BioShock. There were some very nice quality of life changes, which made shuffling through weapons and plasmids easier, and accidentally using Eve when you didn't mean to less frequent. This installment finds you in Rapture 8 years later as Subject Delta, a previously dead Big Daddy who gets resurrected by a little sister. You're sent off to find your former little sister, Eleanor. Many recognizable characters make a return, making the second game feel familiar while still feeling new. Additionally, new plasmids, mechanics, and enemies make this game an enjoyable playthrough. Another sequel on the list, coming in at number 16, Uncharted II, Among Thieves. 2 years after the first game, Nate is asked by former associate Harry and his partner and your former partner Chloe to steal a Mongolian lamp which is somehow connected to Marco Polo, planning to screw over the client and take the lamp for themselves. Long story short, Nate gets double-crossed by Harry and gets arrested. Chloe and Sully later free Nate and they head off for Shambhala in search of an ancient stone. Uncharted 2 made great improvements graphically thanks to the updated game engine, and it also introduced multiplayer, which if you haven't noticed a theme yet, I was terrible at. Next up at number 15, BioShock Infinite. The third and so far final entry in the series saw the story leave the underwater disaster of Rapture and head skyward towards Columbia, a floating city founded by the quote-unquote prophet, Zachary Comstock. Columbia, having seceded from the US, follows its own rules. Set in 1912, you play as Booker DeWitt, an ex-Pinkerton employee who's been hired to find a girl named Elizabeth in exchange for a forgiveness of his gambling debts. This game is more fast-paced and less gloomy feeling than the first two games were. There's a ton of similarities between the first two though, and this will make a lot more sense after getting through some of the story. This was an excellent game, and what really got it to number 15 on the list for me were the two DLCs that really tie all three games together. Next up at number 14, Max Payne. You're Max Payne, an NYPD detective who comes home to find his wife and baby have been murdered by junkies that are strung out on a new designer drug called Valkyr. Max gets caught up in a conspiracy involving a pharmaceutical company, an organized crime family, the US government, and a secret society. This game liberally pulls from Norse mythology in some of its references and also introduces an effect called bullet time, the ability to seemingly slow down time, which was inspired by the Matrix movies. Instead of cutscenes, the game features still images akin to comic book pages that are often narrated by Payne's inner voice. The story is extremely memorable, and to this day, the enemies are some of the best shots in all of gaming. Now at number 13, Remnant II. Literally a better game than From the Ashes in every possible way, Remnant 2 kicked my butt, and I loved it. Even when I was screaming at my screen and blaming everyone but me, I loved it. The game has massive amounts of replayability due to the fact that there are multiple character archetypes, and those archetypes can be paired with another archetype to create a whole new playstyle. If you're unfamiliar with the game, it's often called Dark Souls with guns. A good portion of the game is learning the enemies and their attacks. There's a bit of a story, but it's more of a lore situation where you learn things by reading notes and talking to people and making different choices each time you run through. The game is very deep and often no two playthroughs are the same. Next at number 12, Super Mario Bros. Christmas time, 1985. Myself and 20 other kids I've never seen before are standing in line at a Kmart, eagerly and not so patiently waiting to get a shot at this new game Nintendo has on display. Hey, it's that mustachioed guy from Donkey Kong and the Mario Brothers games. The then named King Koopa has kidnapped Princess Toadstool, and you, Mario, and if you're playing with a friend, his brother Luigi, must head out into the Mushroom Kingdom, clearing 8 different worlds to get to Koopa's castle and drop his butt in the lava. This is another nostalgia listing for me. I have so many memories of playing this with friends and even my mom. Next at number 11, Destiny. This was the first game I got for the PS4. It's also the reason that the other games I got for the PS4 were either never installed or still in the freaking shrink wrap. Although mechanically Destiny 2 is superior, for me and a lot of other players, the real appeal to this game was the friendship. I and many other people met and played with people that we still play other games with to this day. The story was weak, the activities were repetitive, it was locked to 30 FPS, but we logged on every damn day and we did the same damn things every damn day, and damn it, we loved it every day. It's hard to give the story a synopsis since I'm still not really sure what happened to this day, or if anyone even knows what's going on. This is also the very first game I streamed on Twitch and the game I built my core community on, so it holds a special place for me. Moving on into the top 10, coming in at number 10, Immortals, Phoenix Rising. This was my 2020 game of the year. I loved everything about this game. The story, the character dialogue, and the aesthetic. Set on the Golden Isle and heavily inspired by Greek mythology, the game bears a striking resemblance to Breath of the Wild. Having washed up on shore, you play as Phoenix. Accompanied by your birdie companion Phosphorus, you discover the people have been turned to stone. You set out to discover who or what is responsible. Along your way, you run into the likes of Hermes, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, and Athena. You'll also unlock new abilities and gear. The game is chock full of puzzles that are complex but not enough to drive you crazy, and most of the boss fights are really well done. There were several laugh out loud moments in the story of this game, and I highly recommend checking it out. Continuing towards number 1, at number 9, Borderlands II. The premise of this one is simple. Vault Hunter likes loot. Vault Hunter hears there is loot. Vault Hunter goes to where loot is supposed to be. Vault Hunter kills everything in its path in search of said loot. I was very late to the bus on this one. Having played the first game not long after it launched, I did a single playthrough and moved on to something else. I didn't really quite grasp the magnitude of the game. In 2017, I was looking for something new to play on stream. I grabbed the Handsome Collection on PS4. I was really worried about starting a 5-year-old game in a well-established community, but I was quickly welcomed in with open arms, and it led to the eventual Twitch partnership in December of 2017. What else can I say? Loot, skill trees, raid bosses, and more loot. Next up at number 8, Metroid. Until this point, every game I had played had a clear-cut objective and an ending. Then I played the original Metroid. After a short time with this game, I realized I needed something to help me, so I grabbed a notebook and I started trying to map out where I was and where I had been. This game was massive. In 1987, I hadn't seen anything remotely close to a game this size. The planet Thebes, I had to Google that because I couldn't remember, is full of secrets to find which grant ammo capacity and new abilities. You play as Samus, a lone bounty hunter who has been tasked with hunting down and eliminating the space pirates that have stolen samples of a parasitic life form known as a Metroid. You eventually fight pirate ally Kraid and pirate commander Ridley, and then continue on to destroy Mother Brain, thus saving humanity or something. The music is some of the best from an 8-bit game. Oh, also, Samus isn't a male player, which really destroyed some fragile boys in the 80s. Up at number 7, The Last of Us. From the heartbreaking beginning to the almost guilt-ridden ending, The Last of Us is a masterpiece. If you've never played it, I don't want to ruin it for you with any specifics, but you play as Joel. 20 years after a mutant fungus outbreak and a life-altering event, he's working as a smuggler in Boston. Joel and his partner Tess learn that a group called the Fireflies are looking to smuggle a teenage girl named Ellie to Massachusetts. The pair learn that she's been infected and is seemingly immune. Mixing survival stealth with crafting and hectic gunplay, this game stands out as one of the best ever made. Next up at number 6, Alan Wake 2. Holy hell, this game. I don't really know what to say. This game. This was my 2023 Game of the Year, hands down. I absolutely love the way Remedy sets up their stories and the way they weave in lore and Easter eggs. The Remedy connected universe is a massive rabbit hole. In this game, you switch between FBI agent Saga Anderson and writer Alan Wake. Early on, the game will switch you in a scripted manner, but later on, you get the ability to switch at will. When you play as Saga, you can go into what she calls her mind place, where you're able to piece together clues you've found to make sense of the situation and get some direction on what to do next. When you play as Alan, you have access to his writer's room in the dark place, where you can add and change plot details to manipulate his surroundings. As opposed to traditional jump scares, this game features pop-up scares that fill your screen for a split second and make you realize how much water you drank before you sat down to play. You really need to play this game. Now at number 5, Spider-Man 2. Set after the events of Miles Morales, you can alternate between Miles or Peter in seamless fashion, all thanks to the power of the PS5 and its NVMe drive. This game follows the same formula as the previous 2 games and sees you protecting a now larger New York. Brooklyn, Queens, and of course Manhattan are all included. When you're doing a story mission, you're often locked to a specific Spidey as you're likely doing something related to that specific web slinger, but when out and about, you can freely switch between the two. Both heroes have a combined skill tree as well as individual skill trees giving them unique abilities. Venom, as well as their abilities, are also introduced, which greatly expands on the movement and attacks at your disposal. Now at number 4, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Nearing the end of this list, I realize how many Insomniac and Naughty Dog games are on this list. They are some of my favorite developers of all time. Adding only this game to this list hurt. I almost just made a My Favorite Ratchet and Clank Games video instead. I very much love the series and even did a full series playthrough on stream leading up to the launch of Rift Apart, which is the whole reason I bought a PS5 to begin with. Again, the PS5's power shines in this game. Everything is so smooth and fluid. Once again, you play as Ratchet, accompanied, most of the time, by his good buddy Clank. At the beginning of the game, Clank reveals that he has a surprise for you in the form of a repaired Dimensionator. Dr. Nefarious, being, well, nefarious, decides he's going to steal the Dimensionator so that he can continue to do nefarious things. A struggle ensues and dimensional rifts start to open randomly. The 3 of them are pulled through a rift and separated. Ratchet, looking for Clank in his new surroundings, witnesses what appears to be another Lombax leaving the planet with Clank. The introduction of new characters as well as alternate versions of the ones we know and love make for a great story and a great playthrough. At number 3, Control. These last 3 were really hard for me to pin down. They're all great games, and I felt like I was doing them a disservice not putting them all at number 1. But I can't do that, so here we go. Control is another gem in the Remedy connected universe. You play as Jesse Faden through a non-linear story through the oldest house, which is the headquarters for the Federal Bureau of Control, an agency that studies altered world events and objects of power. Led to the oldest house by a telepathic message, Jessie searches for her brother Dylan. Anything beyond that is really spoiler territory, and you should just experience it for yourself, as well as the DLCs, one of which really sets us up for Alan Wake 2. Jessie can find and equip mods to make her gun and abilities more efficient. Seriously, play this game. At number 2, Uncharted, Drake's Fortune. Feeling very much like an Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider hybrid, this was the game that made me fall in love with it all. You play as Nathan Drake, a treasure hunter who, accompanied by reporter Elena Fisher, searches for the coffin of assumed ancestor Francis Drake. After finding the coffin, the diary it holds points them in the direction of El Dorado. Nate and his buddy Sully abandon Elena, fearing that she's going to attract potential rivals, and head off in search of more clues leading to the treasure. I absolutely love the dynamic between Nate and Sully. The constant badgering and picking between the two just works so well. A nice bit of stealth combined with cover shooting, puzzle solving, treasure hunting, and climbing makes this my second favorite game of all time. And finally, coming in at number 1, BioShock. Aside from Borderlands 2, this is my most replayed game. I do an annual playthrough of the series on stream, and it's something my community and I look forward to every year. That feeling of wandering through Rapture for the first time was a dopamine hit, and I've been chasing it ever since. I feel like I know the game inside and out, but I always seem to find something new every time I play it. You play as Jack. After your plane goes down over the ocean, you find yourself in the water in proximity to a lighthouse. You make your way to that lighthouse and into the perfectly inviting bathysphere that leads you down into Rapture. The underwater utopia created by Andrew Ryan was meant to allow people to be free of the control of government and its quote-unquote petty morality. Operating outside of these morals, Adam is discovered at the bottom of the seafloor, which leads to the invention of the highly addictive DNA-altering concoctions called plasmids. Plasmids lead to the downfall of society in Rapture, as its addicted citizens would do anything for more Adam. I could talk about this game, the creation of the little sisters designed to harvest the Atom, or their big daddies created to protect the sisters from the drug-addicted inhabitants of Rapture, but I'll leave all of that to you. Would you kindly play this game? But that's going to wrap up this video. If you're still here hearing this, thank you for watching. I put way more time into this video than any other video I've ever made, and it means a lot that you stayed to the end and you're hearing me say this. So again, thank you. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know what your favorite games are, and please subscribe to the channel. Come hang out with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/damnittohell. I stream almost every day. We play just whatever. I have an awesome community, and I'm sure they would love to welcome you in. But until we meet again, be safe, be sexy, touch a butt.